For nearly a century, Marvel and DC have shaped the mythology of superheroes, often borrowing concepts in a creative dialogue. But when does homage cross into imitation? In this week's top 10, we'll be looking at 10 times Marvel copied from DC. While not explicitly in any rank order, I did my best to go with what I thought were the least well known to the most popular. I'll cover their debut comics, some interesting behind the scenes facts with the creators, and more. With that out of the way, let's dive in. Night Thrasher, Marvel's answer to Batman in the 90s, created by Fabian Nicieza and Mark Bagley. In New Warriors #1, Dwayne Taylor is a tech-savvy vigilante and orphan billionaire, mirroring Bruce Wayne's 1939 debut in Detective Comics #27 by Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Nicieza admitted in a 2015 interview, "We wanted a Batman for the MTV generation, young, angry, and street level." Yet Batman's 85-year legacy overshadows Thrasher's niche 90s appeal. So long term, Thrasher was never going to reach the heights that Batman was, but you have to give it to Marvel for trying. The Squadron Supreme, Roy Thomas and John Buscema introduced this team in Avengers 85 in 1971 as a critique of DC's Justice League. Hyperion, Superman, Nighthawk, Batman, and Power Princess, Wonder Woman, DC's big three. I know we just went over Thrasher, but there's a few Batman analogs in Marvel, but I think Thrasher tends to be the most overt copy. Roy Thomas later stated, "I want to explore how godlike heroes would function in a flawed society," which is more so Marvel's attempt to criticize the League rather than something original that would fit in their world. There have been rumors that they'll be introducing the MCU proper at some point, maybe in Thunderbolts or Secret Wars, but they remain a footnote in comparison to how deep Justice League's lore is at this point. And for me at least, they really don't bring much to Marvel other than just being a subpar copy of the League. The Nova Corps, Marv Wolfman and John Buscema's 1976 Space Force. The Nova Corps was introduced in Nova #1 in 1976, echoing DC's Green Lantern Corps, which was created by John Broome and Gil Kane in Showcase #22 in 1959. Wolfman aimed for a militarized alternative to the Lantern Ring-based mythos. Over the years, the Lanterns have had a lot more exposure in things like animation and comics, one highly polarized live-action film, and hopefully a more quality live-action series coming up. The Nova Corps, on the other hand, had their MCU role in the Guardians of the Galaxy that boosted visibility, but with individual Lanterns like Jordan and Stewart both popular in their own right alongside the expansion of the emotional spectrum, it's not even a contest as to which one is more successful. Reed Richards, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Elastic Genius debuted in Fantastic Four #1 in 1961, but DC's Plastic Man, created by Jack Cole in Police Comics #1 in 1941, and The Elongated Man, which debuted in The Flash #112 in 1960, predate him. To be fair though, Plastic Man was a creation of Quality Comics, but since Quality Comics went under, most of the trademarks were sold to DC. As far as Elongated Man, Broome created him along with Carmine Infantino. The editor at the time, Julius Schwartz, was said to have heavy input, and said that the character was created only because he didn't realize DC had the rights to Plastic Man. Infantino, however, said that they never used Plastic Man as a reference. Kirby acknowledged Plastic Man's influence but emphasized Reed's scientific mind. He wasn't a joke, he was the future. This is one of the core components of Reed Richards that makes him stand out among elastic-based heroes. Sure, in a fight, we're reminded that he can stretch, but more often than not, Reed saves the world more from his lab than actual combat. This is one on the list which took inspiration from DC and Quality Comics, but I think has had a longer and more prominent impact within their own universe. While Plastic Man is well known in universe and to the fans who know him, he has never had a prominent role like Reed. That's not to say he shouldn't, as he's been involved in many events and key storylines, like the Dark Metal storyline. This one is one of the more obvious ones. Alfred Pennyworth, created by Don Cameron and Bob Kane in Batman #16 in 1943, set the archetype of the hero's butler. And Marvel's Jarvis, created by Stan Lee and Don Heck, first debuted in Tales of Suspense #59 in 1964. He filled much of the same role as Alfred, however both evolved in different directions. While Alfred became more of a dedicated father figure and mentor in addition to his butler duties, Jarvis began as a human butler, before evolving into Tony Stark's AI assistant with MCU's Jarvis, voiced by Paul Bettany, modernizing the role. But Alfred's emotional depth in comics, movies, and the anime series have cemented his place in Batman lore and in DC Comics. Black Cat and Catwoman. Marv Wolfman and David Cockrum introduced Felicia Hardy as the Black Cat in Amazing Spider-Man 194 in 1979, 39 years after Bill Finger and Bob Kane's Catwoman debuted in Batman #1 in 1940. Wolfman noted, "I wanted Selina's allure, but with a wilder edge. This is definitely one of the more straightforward copycats. You see what I did there?
Funny.
Alright, both are thieves that fill the role between hero and anti-hero at times and help the hero in times of extreme need. Both act as possible love interests when the story fits. Arguably, Catwoman has had more prominence in larger media due to multiple live-action appearances and animated series roles, as well as being a playable character in the Arkham City game. Black Cat has had prominent roles in Spider-Man the Animated Series from the 90s, but has yet to appear in live action despite planned movies having gone into pre-production before being cancelled. She has had a prominent role in the Spider-Man game for the PS4, as well as the follow-up on the PS5. The Superman. Marvel has copied the Superman archetype a few times. In an earlier entry, I mentioned Hyperion. Alongside the Squadron Supreme, Thomas openly called Hyperion a cautionary Superman. This critique followed most of the Squadron, who in general was a criticism on the idea of the Justice League. But Hyperion has been the most prominently used, with different versions fitting in whenever the story calls for it. Sentry, on the other hand, also fits a Superman-like role, but creator Paul Jenkins, along Jay Lee, designed the character to be more as a Superman meets mental illness type of character. This character has a far more interesting story than Hyperion, at least in my opinion. Robert Reynolds is just an average dude, at least for most people, until he remembers that he's this superhero and his arch nemesis the Void is coming back. The writers retroactively put Sentry into Marvel's history as he had erased the memories of everyone in the world, including himself, in order to stop the Void, which we later find out to be the Sentry himself, or more accurately, his other half. Despite initially being a Superman archetype, this character evolved into something different, and is set to appear in the upcoming Thunderbolts film. Yet Clark's 1938 debut in Action Comics #1 and long history has overshadowed every other one of these characters by a long shot. Green Arrow first debuted in More Fun Comics #73 in 1941, and preceded Hawkeye, which debuted in Tales of Suspense #57 by 23 years. I mean, these are loosely copies at best, but one did predate the other. Lee admitted, "We needed a Robin Hood type, but with flaws." One could argue that the Green Arrow character himself was a ripoff of Bruce Wayne and Robin Hood, but having Hawkeye, at least in the early Avengers comics, was reminiscent of Green Arrow's run from the Golden Age to that point. But their paths split over the years, having become completely unique from one another, and both enjoying success in live action. Jeremy Renner's MCU portrayal really brought a lot of depth to a character that could have come off as stale and simple into a complex hero that has had extensive involvement in the history of the MCU. Green Arrow's rise to prominence outside of comics came with the Stephen Amell-led Arrow series on the CW that led to the television boom of DC shows in the 2010s. Deathstroke the Terminator, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, debuted in the New Teen Titans #2 in 1980. He's a mercenary and a prominent Teen Titans villain who's become a regular character in DC Comics, in Teen Titans related media, and even appeared in several video games. While he's a notable character in his own right, it's the Marvel copy that easily overtakes his popularity. Deathstroke inspired Rob Liefeld's Deadpool, which debuted in New Mutants #98 in 1991. Liefeld confessed, "I took Deathstroke's name, Slade Wilson, Wade Wilson, and design, and then added absurdity." This led to a long run of comic book series and other miniseries, which itself was popular due in part to Deadpool's tendency to break the fourth wall. But it was Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool movie that made the character blow up into the mainstream. This franchise has eclipsed a box office of over $1 billion and has led to a dedicated army of Deadpool cosplayers at every convention and Halloween party, insane amounts of merchandise, and a prominent place in pop culture. The Cosmic Tyrants. Now, arguably, if we're going on simple popularity, Deadpool should have been first, but I think this one has a slight edge. Both Thanos and Darkseid are cosmic level threats who easily defeat, if not outright massacre, most heroes on their own. It is this status and power that has driven the respective universe's heroes to unite together in order to defeat them. Jack Kirby's Darkseid debuted in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen #134 in 1970 and was expanded in the New Gods comics. He's a powerhouse and centerpiece to Kirby's fourth world, but eventually he went on to become a universal threat and prominent Superman and Justice League villain. His purpose and drive had been to find the anti-life equation, which would allow him to enslave the multiverse by eliminating all hope and free will in sentient beings. Currently, he is the mastermind behind the new Absolute Universe running in DC Comics. On the Marvel side, Darkseid directly inspired Jim Starlin's Thanos, which debuted in Iron Man #55 in 1973. Starlin admitted, "I wanted a Darkseid-like figure, but with a twisted love for death." Thanos is a powerful cosmic figure whose history is tied to the Eternals, which was also developed by Kirby and whose work inspired Starlin. Thanos, also known as the Mad Titan, is obsessed with pleasing the Mistress of Death, leading him to kill others to curry her favor. His obsession leads him to find the Infinity Stones and the creation of the Infinity Gauntlet, which would allow control of universal forces. It's this arc that was adapted into the MCU, which led to a massive decade-long series of movies that changed how we define cinema. It cannot be understated how much of an impact Endgame has been on pop culture, but that's not to say Darkseid is by no means unpopular. Darkseid has been a presence in DC media for 3 decades now, and will continue to be, but lately, Thanos has disappeared in recent Marvel media. Not to say he's one and done, but in this case, I think the original will outlast the copy. From Kirby to Feige, inspiration has always fueled comics. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, even if at times it's just an obvious ripoff. But that's not to say that DC is innocent of this, as they have taken inspiration from Marvel as well for some of their characters. Which one of these is your favorite? The Merc with the mouth? Or maybe the Mad Titan? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed what you're seeing, consider giving it a like. That being said, take care, and you guys have an awesome day. For some more Marvel action, click here. And if you need more top 10s in your life, click over here.